Listen now to verses 7 to 12 of Isaiah 58. I will tell you what it really means to worship the Lord. Remove the chains of prisoners who are chained unjustly. Free those who are abused. Share your food with everyone who is hungry. Share your home with the poor and the homeless. Give clothes to those in need, and don't turn away your relatives. Then your light will shine like the dawning sun, and you will be quickly healed. Your honesty will protect you as you advance, and the glory of the Lord will defend you from behind. When you beg the Lord for help, she will answer, "Here I am." Don't mistreat others or falsely accuse them or say something cruel. Give your food to the hungry and care for the homeless. Then your light will shine in the dark, and your darkest hour will be like the midday sun. The Lord will always guide you and provide good things to eat. When you are in the desert, she will make you healthy. You will be like a garden that has plenty of water, or like a stream that never runs dry. You will rebuild those houses left in ruins for years. You will be known as a builder and repairer. Now to the book of James. This is often described as being like a short book of instructions for daily living. James chapter 2, from verse 14. My friends, what good is it to say you have faith when you don't do anything to show that you have faith? Can that kind of faith save you? If you know someone who hasn't got any clothes or food, you shouldn't just say, "Well, I hope all goes well for you. I hope you will be warm and that you'll have plenty to eat." What good is it to say this unless you do something to help? Faith that doesn't lead to good works is all alone and dead. Now suppose someone disagrees and says, it is possible to have faith without doing kind deeds. I would answer, prove that you have faith without doing kind deeds, and I will prove that I have faith by doing them.
Good morning, or if we're in the Philippines, I'd say magandang umaga, which basically is the same. I do, like Beverly, want to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Kaurna people and recognise their traditions and also their understanding of God, which precedes us bringing the gospel to their lands. I also want to acknowledge and thank Jordan. He's now gone. He's gone out. But it's wonderful, isn't it, when you see young people taking on the whole message behind today, which is actually turning your faith into actions. And that's fantastic. And Morialta continues to inspire the broader Uniting Church in South Australia by doing those very things. So what are we going to say today? The whole message is really, what good is faith without actions? And Christine read to us that code for living from Isaiah. And we have to remember that the code for our living goes back thousands of years. And Isaiah spells out the sort of things that you need to do. And a very central theme through that is being aware of the needs of others, of standing by the poor, of giving a voice for the vulnerable, of testing what is about your neighbour rather than just looking about what you can get for yourself. I'm not going to spend 15 minutes pulling aside Isaiah, which I could. I love Isaiah, but when I think of the Old Testament, the first book I go to is Isaiah. I really enjoy it. Perhaps it's a reflection of how much I can understand. But I actually really like it. But the central message today comes from James. And that's where they pose that question. What good is faith without actions? And we can assign many, many points of hypocrisy to our churches over the years. But one of the things that I think is a lasting legacy that the community has to recognise is the commitment that the church, and by that I mean the world church, has made to fulfilling God's mission, in particular around putting faith into actions. And the last time I spoke here, Colin Cargill, not Colin Scargill as I referred to him as, he presented to you the Millennium Development Goals and the more recent iteration, the Sustainable Development Goals. That is a template that the United Nations has embraced, and 186 of its member countries have signed up to, including Australia, to put that, we would say faith, but the faith in terms of making the world a better place into actions. The precursor to that is the World Council of Churches and its work it's done over many, many years. That's a very good example of the impact that the church and the faith communities have had on making the world a better place. But let's go to the last bit of the verse. It's really confronting, isn't it? Where James says, suppose there are brothers and sisters who need clothes and don't have enough to eat. What good is there saying to them, oh, God bless you, keep warm and eat well, if you don't give them the necessities of life? How many times in our community have we been challenged by the sights of poverty, by those who are reaching out for our help, only to move to an advert on buying something new for yourself? And our community sometimes, in my view, doesn't get this. I believe Australia used to get this and did it extremely well, both in our formation as a colony and in more recent years in terms of our construction of a better world through the foreign aid, which we now call Australian aid. But let's look at what I think is our community's hypocrisy on this. Just to give you a few facts, because there are always people in the audience who like facts. I'm one of them. Despite the fact that the Australian aid, foreign aid budget, accounts for less than 1% of the total federal budget, so for all of those people in the community that say we're spending too much on foreign aid, Senator Jackie Lambie thinks we spend billions and billions of dollars more than we ever spent. What you need to be aware of is it's less than 1%. It was 0.9%, it's now 0.8%. But that 0.8%, or 0.9 as it was, has made up a quarter, 25% of all the budget savings measures. So when, in 2014, when the government said we are spending more than we are earning, and I think in fairness the community agreed that we need to do something about it, a quarter of the way of saving the money came off the backs of the poor, directly off the backs of the poor overseas. $11.3 billion in terms of forward estimates, which I always like to remind people is imagine $1 million and get 11,000 piles of it. That's what's being cut out of the budget. Just tell me if this seems harsh in the reality of the fact that we are the third wealthiest country per capita and on top of that we have the third lowest debt ratio. The third lowest. I'm right in that, and I could spend another 15 minutes giving you data on that around the OECD. So that's the position that we are in as a nation at the moment. Most recently, there was a cut to the budget, and some of you took some action, and we really appreciated that through the Campaign for Australian Aid, that took another $224 million out of the Australian Aid budget. Let me just give you a bit of an insight as to what that would do. It would have vaccinated 1.5 or 1.49 million children against preventable diseases. Or it could have provided a year's quality education for 339,400 children. Australia has had a significant role in the contemporary education of people in developing countries. Or it would have treated, and this is very close to our hearts in not only just the Philippines but around Baguio, and that is it could have treated 344,600 people to prevent them suffering tuberculosis. That's what it means. It's not just little figures on a paper or political statements or doorstops to journalists or making us feel that we're doing the tough thing. That's what it means. Now, let me talk a little bit about what we have done as a church to our approach in this regard. You, through supporting the North Luzon Health and Literacy Project, and here I give terrific thanks to our mission team because they have rallied around in terms of focusing their areas of fundraising, you have directly contributed to this. We raised, around South Australia, we have raised just under $25,000, and that of course is on top of things. And it's actually a Uniting Church of South Australia Presbyterian Synod project. Uniting World, although they are there as partners, they're not involved in this one. And it's a three-way partnership between us and the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, our partner, and the people in the community. But it actually goes a bit further than that, because the people in the community, the Irisan people, who are refugees in their own country, got together and said, we want to do things differently. And this will not surprise half of the audience and will challenge the other half. All made up of women, all who made a really clear decision that their next generation was going to have a much better way in life than they did. I always say, and actually I shouldn't take credit for this because Tim Costello said it first, if you want to change a community, speak to the women first, because they know how to do it. They're the great influencers, they're the great strategists, they do it collaboratively, and generally speaking, if you actually get out of their way, they get it done. And this is a very good example of that. So, the community health and education was actually trying to get people to do a number of things, but one of them was to take responsibility for their own health. In the Philippines, there is one doctor for every 28,000 people. That's a bit of a acute emergency, isn't it? And of course, in some places like Baguio, that's not too bad, but in the more what we would call distant areas, it gets much worse than that. And there's only one nurse for every 16,000 people. So I always say, if you're in the Philippines, the best way to have good health is to avoid being sick. If we go to the next slide. These are the sort of people that you're helping. They don't look very different to us, do they? And that's one of the things that we like to remind the community, that we're not helping distant people that we have no connection with. We're helping people that are not only our partners, but they're people that are exactly like us, that are doing exactly the same things we want to do. We'll go to the next one, thank you. So the way to do this is you could either rush in there with a whole lot of medicines or a whole lot of doctors or a whole lot of here's how we could help you approach, or you could build the capacity of the people that you are assisting. And that's the approach that our partners, the United Church of Christ in the Philippines, have always pursued. They're not about a paternalistic relationship where people give them money and they go and do what they choose to do with it. They're about building the people that they live within, in their community, so that they don't need to rely on that in the future, so that they can continue to make the choices that God gives us all. And we are doing that by supporting a program where they go and train what we would call health workers, community workers, to actually deliver the message around the community about taking responsibility for your health, showing them ways to do that through good nutrition. The Philippines, as Doug and Jenny and others will tell you, is very much a bit of a cosmos of what it could be like if you were living in America or in Asia. So one of the things that follows that is all the lovely fast food that of course we can't say is damaging to our health, even though it's very closely linked with obesity and diabetes and everything else. And it's having the same effect in the Philippines. So part of it is getting a good diet, the very messages we're putting here. And the other bit of it is to actually train people so they can do the early detection when people are not well. When you have one person for every 28,000, when you have one doctor for every 28,000 people, what it means, of course, is that when you go to get to see that doctor in a health facility, you are going to be very sick. So they see you when you are very ill. So early detection. So if we can go to the next one, please. And what that is that's teaching these, and we can proceed to the next one, that is teaching these community workers how to pick up some of those early signs. And this is an example of someone. I got to meet this man. I actually got to sit in one of their seminars. Manon Carlos, and he's an expert in digestive and urinary systems. So he's actually someone who can use his medical knowledge, what we would call traditional medicine. The Filipino people would call that Western medicine, and actually combine that with what they would call their traditional medicine, or what we often refer to as Eastern medicine. So we just move to the next one. And do that by having consultations and conversations with people in small groups to talk about the need to improve their health, as that you do in a community health model. We'll go to the next one. And then by doing that, the groups increase in their interest within the community, and they involve other people. It's that model that works, and we'll just go to the next one. And then you have people who are actively involved in knowing how to improve the health and outcomes of the people around them. And that particular conversation involves the connection between the health workers and the medical interns, so that those that are delivering health in their public health systems actually understand what the community health workers are saying out in the field, and vice versa. We go to the next one. Here we have a nurse volunteer taking an interview with a patient. We'll move to the next one. And there, someone being treated by what we would refer to again as alternative medicine, as a way of dealing with a very serious underlying condition. Now, if we just move to these, and you can just, if you like, David, just go through them as they go. This is a very good example of a way in which, this is a lecture that I sat in. If you just stay there, David, that is where they did the equivalent of what we would call a mind map, to show how the observation of symptoms that we would actually make sense of can be connected to impacts that those symptoms are having around the body, and then try and understand the underlying cause. And then, having done that, then to determine what the best ways of treating that. We'll go to the next one. That person sticking out their tongue is me. And that's not because I'm being rude, it's actually because they actually got me to poke my tongue out, then they looked at the areas of the tongue, and then they all had a go at trying to identify what my underlying conditions were. You'll be pleased to know that personality disorder didn't come up, but what they did do is they found that I do suffer from hypertension, which is true. And I do, I have a condition associated with that. So it's a very good way, and that's a very cheap way, it's a very effective way of dealing with that. Now, if I'm suffering from hypertension in the Philippines and I don't have access to medication, which you'll be pleased to know I do here, what that means is, of course, the sooner I get to see someone and get that treatment, the better. We move to the next one. And sometimes that can be in the form of other conditions, particularly musculoskeletal, and other examples where they are combining those two types of medicine. We'll just stop there. Thank you, David. So what can we do? When we come back to this idea of James, of turning our faith into actions, what can we do? Well, you are already doing something, as I've just demonstrated to you. You are doing something in this congregation through the work of your mission team. You are doing something every time you make a donation to this program. And you are doing something because the wider Uniting Church, not only in South Australia but in Australia, is doing a lot, as Beverly says, through Uniting World and other things. If you make donations to those causes, you can go home knowing that you are putting James into action. You are lifting yourself to what Isaiah asked of you, or what God asked of you through Isaiah. But there is something else that you can do too. And one of those things that you can do is you can spread the word in your community about the value of what we are doing. Marketing is everything. And why it is everything is because it's about communication at its forefront, so that people understand that what you're doing makes sense. What you're doing makes a difference. It makes an impact. The second thing you can do is you can talk in your broader community about things that I've just mentioned around the Australian aid budget. So that when people say, oh, we spend about 20% of our budget on aid, you can say, actually you don't. We never have. It's less than 1%. Oh, is it really? Oh. Or maybe we should increase it to 10%. Happy with that. Or you could say to them, we know that it makes a difference because we've stopped just pumping money into countries and dropping off food. We work with the partner organisations and we make this sort of a difference. We make this sort of a difference to the lives of people that we will never meet, but we will know will grow up and thrive in our society. And as a good example, my final example with a project, we could do things like the model that we know is a model that is successful, and that is working with the local people, and in this occasion with the indigenous people in the Philippines, the Aita people, to understand what it is to connect people back to their land, back to their culture, through a sustainable living model. Now, the Aita Community Development Project, this is a beautiful project that you, because you're a member of the Uniting Church in South Australia, are part of. This is our second of our partnerships there with Middle Luzon, our most recent partnerships. And this area of the Philippines is in the Zambales, which is, if the slide we had up before, it's that bit that goes along closer to the China Sea. Beautiful country. If anyone's travelled to Vietnam and you've gone to Ha Long Bay and you remember those beautiful islands sitting out in the sea, think of that and just go inland a little bit and you've got this. It's magnificent. And this is a partnership. This is not a partnership between the do-gooders that have come in from overseas and have just helped them out by giving them money that sometimes people suggest the church does, which I might add we've never done. This is a partnership between the Uniting Church of South Australia, the Uniting Church of the Philippines, in particular the Middle Luzon jurisdiction, not just the bishop but the local congregations as well, the local community, which are indigenous people known as the Aita people, who've been moved off their traditional lands and parked out there in the mountains because the Americans wanted to use their good fishing areas for their naval base. So they've, over many years, made their existence there. And the university, the local university, which is doing research into a different type of rice. This is a drought-tolerant rice. That sounds a bit like South Australia, doesn't it? And also someone from another field of education, which we would tend to call more the alternative field of education, about doing things in an environmentally sustainable way. That is not just pumping chemicals onto land to lift production, but using different techniques. That's what you're involved in. This is highly sophisticated stuff. It is research, and the university is also providing agricultural engineering advice so that when we actually help them to bring the water down to flood their rice fields, and David, if you perhaps could show those like that, that is done in the most efficient way. And we just go to the last slide, and that gives you some idea. You see that big thing up there, that big mountain? That's their rainwater tank. So when the water hits that, it just runs down and they store it and then they run it down a series of aqueducts. I've got to say it's pretty spectacular, just quietly. But this is an example of what you are doing. And you can do this by supporting it financially in future years, but the real thing you can do is you can have some confidence that we are changing communities for the long term. The Aita people are not just able to survive then, they're able to prove in the context of the Philippines that they've got continuous occupation of the land and therefore maintain ownership and not be pushed out because there's a very large mine just down the road. This is what you're doing. And you're doing it culturally appropriate. You're doing it to support an Indigenous culture which will maintain one of its languages. How effective is that with a small amount of money? They only are asking $10,000 for us for this. Such a small amount of money does so much. So I just want to close on that note, to think of where we're at. What James says in verse 18. Show me how anyone can have faith without actions. And I, the Uniting Church in South Australia, the Uniting Church in Australia, the worldwide church, all of the people that are faithful to God will show you faith by my actions. Thanks be to God.